Hey there, it's Corrine. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm sharing 2 notebook journals that I made, and these notebooks are both the same size. They're both 9 by 6. For one of them, I'm using Echo Park Be Happy collection, and the other one I'm using a few different papers. The main paper is from Webster's Pages. So I'm using a pre-made notebook that I purchased from Amazon, and here is the packaging for it. It's 5.5 by 8.5, and I'm using 2 of those, one for each notebook that I made. And it's really pretty paper, it's quality paper, but it was sort of expensive. I got it from Amazon. I don't think I would purchase it again. I think I paid $8. And you can find them from the Dollar Tree. You can also make your own, which I did here. I like to print a lot of my papers, so I'm making this for a different album or notebook that I'm working on. So you need 2 pieces of chipboard, medium weight, 6 by 9. The spine is 3/4 inch by 9, and I'm using a piece of 3 by 9 Tyvek. You don't have to do that, but it does help to strengthen the spine. I have some papers. I do need to cut all these down. These are Felicity Jane papers that I thought went well with that main Webster's Pages piece here. I knew I wanted to use that for my focal point or my main paper on the front cover. Here I'm just showing you, I set up some templates that you'll see me use later, and it just makes it easier for me to, when I'm making mini albums or when I'm making books like this. And essentially how we're covering this is exactly how I make a mini album. So here are the front covers. They're 8.25 by 10 inches, and you want them to be, the chipboards are 6 by 9, so you want the height to be 1 inch larger. The 8.25 we can cut down if it's too long in the end. So I like to add, you'll see me use glue and tape interchangeably throughout this album. I added my chipboard spine piece to the Tyvek piece, and like I said, that's not, you don't have to have that, but I like to recycle that from any type of work packages that I get, things like that. I always save that and reuse it. It does help to strengthen the spine. I'm using some Miracle tape as my tape, and also some Fabri-Tac by Beacon. You can purchase that from either Amazon or Walmart. I like to go around all the edges with the tape, so I make sure that it doesn't spill out and it's adhered well, and then I add the liquid glue to the center because liquid glue is much cheaper than actual tape. And here's where I'm using my pieces to kind of separate, so you always want to leave a little bit of a gap so it folds nicely. This piece here is just a piece of chipboard with a 1/2 inch glued to the top of it. That way when I butt it up against the edge of my chipboard, I know that I'm left with a 1/2 inch of paper. And I did this because I cut my finger really bad with a craft knife before, so it's my way of keeping my hands away from the blade as I use it. And it makes it quick and easy. So this is exactly how I would make a mini album. Of course, the spine would be larger, but I just am adding tape to the entire outside of the paper, mitering the corners. I'm using this corner miter from Colorways. I'm not sure if they still sell that. And then I like to release all the backing and then press down on the long edges first. Press really well, go over it with your bone folder, make sure that it's adhered well. And you may have saw me bending the paper first. That's my way of just kind of breaking up those paper fibers to get the paper moving in the direction we want. Here I'm taking off a little bit more off the edges because it'll leave a bulky piece. You don't want to do that, so I cut off just slightly. You don't want to cut too close to the chipboard or you'll expose the chipboard. And then once you do, you want to tuck in those little pieces. That's what I'm doing here, is I'm tucking in those extra little pieces before I fold it over. Again, really going around with my bone folder and pressing it down, and here we have our little album. So I'm deciding on what I'm going to, I printed out some papers. These are all from Digital Collections, Felicity Jane. I printed out some papers and deciding here what I want to use. I pulled out my guillotine cutter just so I could take off the white edges. And I decided to go with this color for the inside of the album. You could do pattern paper, different ones, but I cut 2 pieces to 8 7/8 by 8 inches. The second one is, the one piece to 8 7/8 by 8 inches. The second one is also the same height, which is 8 7/8 inch by 6 3/8 of an inch. Again, going around with my tape, pressing that down, and then what I like to do is just release the paper from the top. I'm also, you'll see here, adding tape along the spine, because when you fold the book, if you don't have it all adhered down very well, especially around where the spine meets the front and back cover, it will bubble. So you want to make sure you have a lot of, whether it's wet glue, I like to use tape there and then also add wet glue, which you'll see me do here in a second. And I'm just releasing the top part of the backing paper, and that way I can get my paper lined up where I want it before adhering it down. So again, you want to make sure that you have it completely adhered right by where it bends, because it'll leave a big bubble in there, and you don't want to do that. I'm lightly going over it with my bone folder there in that crease, and then I adhered the second piece down the exact same way, really pressing it down with my brayer and then lightly going over it with my bone folder in the creases. These are super simple to make. I actually made this, the film got corrupted, the footage got corrupted, so I wanted to show that part making of the album. So I went ahead and made another one on film. That way I had 2 of them to be able to show. This piece is cut to 8 5/8 by 5 3/4. This is going to be my pattern paper for the front. This is a Felicity Jane paper that I cut down. So because I lost the footage on the first part, I ended up making 2 albums. This one here specifically I was making for my Aunt Carol. And then when, like I said, I needed to make another one in order to film it, I decided to go ahead and make another one using Echo Park collection. So again, adding tape around the perimeter and then glue to. This makes for a super cute notebook. I love taking notes. I'm a note taker, so I cut 2 pieces of pattern paper 8 3/4 by 5 7/8, and I decided I wanted to add a little tie to this one. So I'm just adding some tape to where I think the ribbon is going to go. I pulled out some matching pink satin ribbon. Again, taking the backing paper off just the top, it allows you to kind of slide it around without it adhering, getting it where you want, and then just pressing it down. Once you're happy with that, you can pull up the rest of the tape backing. And this here, I'm just eyeballing it where I believe the center is, adding Fabri-Tac to the center, and I'll do the exact same on the back. As you'll see, I am not shy with glue. I want to make sure that my album or journal stays put together. So I'm tying that off, cutting it down. You can take a lighter to the edges very, very carefully, very quickly to the edges of that ribbon, and that'll kind of sear it so it doesn't fray, but I don't seem to have fraying with this ribbon. So here's 2 pieces, 8 1/4 inch by 5 1/4. And I love this Webster's pages. I decided to add a white mat behind it. Those are going to be 8.5 by 5.5. For these, I'm just adhering down with some wet glue. If you do purchase the ones from the Dollar Tree or maybe Walmart, you may have to adjust the spine somewhat. You want to adjust the spine to how thick your notebook paper is. The ones I found from the Dollar Tree are super thin, so you would have to either glue a few of them together, to have a decent size journal on the inside, but it can definitely be done. So I just wanted to finish off the spine piece. I just added a matching piece of that cardstock. So here I pulled out some Spellbinders dies. I spent a few days just die cutting all sorts of colors. This is the mini blooms and sprigs. And also I used the Spellbinders Be Bold Blooms. I love these dies. These are some of my favorite dies. And as you can see, I cut a bunch. I love having them on hand. I like to throw together cards. I used all Concord in 9 papers, just all different colors, and I like to keep them separated. That way it's easy for me to kind of know what I'm looking for. Otherwise it becomes too much of a mess. So this journal card is 5 1/4 by 3 3/4, and I'm going to mat it with a piece of 5 1/2 by 4. This is going to go on the front of my journal. And I believe that's a silhouette. I got that from the Silhouette Design Store. If I can find that, I'll be sure to link that below. I love the sentiment on it. Just be your own beautiful self. I don't have it in the photos, but in the finished book, I went ahead and added a larger black heart die cut to that, going over the black heart die cut, just a little bit larger, and a little bit wider and larger, and it turned out really pretty. I wish I had a photo of that, but I did that right before I was sending it off to my aunt. So again, that's 4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to adhere that down with some ATG tape, a little bit of wet glue, and I'm kind of putting it off to the right slightly because I know that I want my flowers to go around the left. And I'm just going to play around with them. I'm going to try and figure out what I like. I do end up doubling all of them just to give them a little bit more thickness, being that it's on the front of the album. I slightly off-center them, not completely, just a little bit to make them look fuller. So I keep these all stored in these really thick Ziploc bags that I believe I got from Spellbinders a long time ago. I just have them and I can pull them all out and make, I've used these dies several times. I put on a couple movies. I spent a couple days just die cutting, but it was very enjoyable, and now they're all ready to go for future projects, and I've used them several times now. So I'm going to go ahead and put several sprigs together. I just use the packaging as a guide to which pieces go with which. And I'm using a little bit of wet glue and my jewel picker to kind of help me out here to place them. I don't do all of these on screen because it did take me a little while. But what I found is I pulled out a sticky mat. That was helpful to kind of hold the main piece in place in order for me to place all these little buds on them. And this is so much fun to do. Once you put them all together, it's so satisfying. I think I was talking to my sister on the phone, so I think I forgot to film part of it. So I apologize about that, but the part where I was putting them together, so I think you'll see here in a moment that we come back and I have them already laid out. Here's the sticky mat that I was talking about. I got these from the Dollar Tree, and it does make it easier to just kind of put your pieces down and adhere them this way. That way you're not trying to use glue such tiny pieces. I'm using a fine tip bottle, and in that I have some art glitter glue. That's probably my favorite wet glue, that and the Fabri-Tac. I'm just picking out colors that I think go well with the pattern paper on the front. I'm using my reverse tweezers also to help with this process. So here's where we cut back. Again, I apologize. I just simply arranged some of the flower buds on there, and I'm just using a combination of wet glue and foam tape to adhere some of those buds down. I'm trying to decide what I want to add to the center of these flowers. Using a little hot glue and some E6000, I'm adding both pearls and these silver rhinestone gemstones. So pretty. I love these, and I love adding the pearls. It's such a feminine, soft cover. I also have these clear dewdrops that I'm adding with some E6000, or wet glue rather. That wet glue dries clear, so I'm just kind of tucking those here and there where I think they look good. And at this point, I don't believe that I've added any of the foam tape or pop dots behind the flowers, but I go back and do that because I love the look of having them slightly popped up here and there. I believe that's a crystal katana that I'm using to pick up those dewdrops. It really does help. And then going through, I'll skip past some of this, but I did add little foam pieces that I cut down to behind most of those flowers. I like to take my heat gun if I'm using hot glue, and it just kind of, if you go over it quickly, it just kind of makes all those little glue strings dissipate. So for the front, I pulled out a tag that I ended up not using, and I also pulled out this Peachy Cheap, it's a little file folder, and I'm using my Empress to cut it out. It's made for two pieces, so it's like a little bit of a book, like for a journal book, but I only used one piece. And I do cut out, like I said, a tag, but I don't end up using that tag in this. Again, I'm using some Felicity Jane pattern paper that I printed out, and instead of, I'm just reinforcing the score lines that the die cut makes. I do need to trim slightly the edge off because, again, this is made to do two of those. You're supposed to cut them out twice and it's supposed to fold in together, but I only wanted the one. So I'm just going to slightly trim it here, just slightly, and glue that over and make a little pocket for the inside page. Add some glue at the bottom to actually make it a pocket, and then I just cut down some of the pattern paper that I had and used a border punch for the top. I have two of those there because I was testing out this border punch to see if I was going to like it, and I did like it, so I went ahead and cut the second piece that I actually thought was a little bit prettier because it had the hearts all the way to the edge. doing one more with my, I believe that's an EK Success notebook edge punch. I've had that in my stash for years and years. That one's really pretty. It's gradient. I wanted it to lay a little bit lower in the pocket, so I just cut off the edge slightly, as you can see there, about 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm pulling out some American Craft twine. I'm going to go ahead and wrap that around a few times and tie that off. Here is where your reverse tweezers come in handy. You can kind of hold them. I don't think I showed that here, but I kind of held that in place while I put the knot in it. Now I'm going to tie a bow. I'm going to add my adhesive, and then I decide to actually put this little pocket towards the left instead of in the center. And here's my finished album. Super cute. I sent it off to my Aunt Carol. She said it brought tears to her eyes, so it was a success. Hopefully she'll get some use out of it. So now I'm going to go into the second album that I made. It's the exact same size. I cut out a lot of the filming because obviously I don't want this album to be, or this video rather, to be too long. But I glued this piece down and then I went back to show you. It's just I just did a random shape, which you'll see here in just a moment. I'm using my template to cut off a 1/2 inch because again, when I butt that up against the other chipboard, I know that I'm left with a 1/2 inch of paper to adhere down. This is the Beacon Fabri-Tac that I use. This that I'm wrapping is actually a decorative piece going on the front of the album, which, like I said, you'll see in just a moment. And this Echo Park Be Happy collection is so super cute. So I'm going to miter the corners just like I did with the other one. This way it enables us to fold it and not have a bunch of bulk on the corners. There's the same notebook. I used the same paper. Like I said, I had to refilm it because I lost the footage of the first one. And all I did is I took the notebook and laid it on top of the chipboard, traced it out with a piece of paper, just a random shape. There's no rhyme or reason. I just wanted it to have something a little different on the front of the album. So I'm going to wrap this the exact same way by mitering those corners, folding over the longer pieces. And then once I've cut those corners a little bit more, not too much, you don't want the chipboard to show, then you just fold in those extra bulky pieces. So a lot of this that I'm filming with this album is going to be redundant, so I did cut it out, but I did want to also show you that I wanted this focal piece to be completely wrapped because it does give it a little bit of a different look. And with this paper, the black looks amazing. So I wanted to give myself a black border. So again, I simply traced it out on the black paper, used my Fiskars trimmer, and left myself with just a slight border to go on the front cover. I'm going to go ahead and erase my paper, my pencil lines, and adhere that onto the front of the book. So again, I just wanted some sort of random, I didn't want it to be a rectangle. I wanted some little bit different shape. I'm going to adhere this black piece down first. Pushing that, I wanted it to go all the way up to the right side. And the left side folds over slightly. I was a little bit worried about opening and closing the book that it would give, so I just trimmed it off, and it looks good in the finished product. So here's my wrapped piece, adding that, as you can see, with some liquid glue. And my pieces are 8 3/4 by 5 3/4 and 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. And these are going to give me the matting for the back. I adhere these on the exact same way I always do, with both liquid and double-sided tape. Again, when you take the releasing off just the top, it kind of allows you to move it around, get it where you want. Once you're happy, press that down and then lift the paper to take off the rest of the backing. The insides are 8 7/8 by 8 1/2 and 8 7/8 by 5 7/8. And the reason I do that is I don't want to double over the paper over the spine pieces. It'll make it a little too thick. So you just have the pages overlap slightly in the spine area. You don't want to go over to the other side of it. I hope that makes sense. You don't want to double it up on both sides because when you fold it in, it's going to be too bulky. So I just have it slightly overlap on one of the sides. In a mini album, I have it overlap strictly in the spine because the spine is larger. It gives you the space to do that. So here I'm cutting down some paper. I wanted a pocket for the front of the inside of this. So I just am pretty much eyeballing it, using my pencil to make guides, and then going back and cutting it. I wanted to give my pocket some tabs, so I just cut 1-inch pieces. No, they were 2-inch pieces, I believe, of the same matching cardstock that I scored in half and glued half to the pocket, and now I'm gluing the other half. And this will allow space in my pocket for journaling cards, so it's not so tight getting something in and out of there. And now I'm adhering down the pattern paper for it. I also adhered down the notebook the exact same way with wet glue and double-sided tape. Here are some journaling cards that I just made for the inside. And for the front of the album, I pulled out some nesting hexagons from Waffle Flower Crafts. They're the stitched. And I also pulled out some Concord and 9 papers. And I ended up using 3 hexagons. One of them I cut, so there's going to be 4 pieces that you see. And I wanted some Distress Oxide to kind of color up the sides, give it a little bit of color to them. This element is from the collection. I doubled up everything that you see me using. All of these have been cut with my Silhouette Cameo, but you can also fussy cut them. And I did double, some of them tripled them with mostly black cardstock. That one I had that you saw, the beehive, I had 2 of them, so I just used what I had. But most of them I doubled with black cardstock. And here I just wanted to add something to the inside spine. So here's where I just start laying things out, trying to figure out what I want. That Hello Sunshine is also an element from the collection. And I did cut my own black border for it to give it a nice black border. And I cut it, I think, 3 different times. I'm adding some white stitching around all the hexagons. And now that I think I kind of have my layout, I'm just kind of going through and gluing things down. Here's where I decided to cut that off so I could use another piece of it because most of it was hiding. The flowers here, I did the same thing. I added some pop dots behind part of it and some wet glue behind some of the other part just to have it dimensional in part of it. I pulled out some Wild Orchid Crafts flowers. I pulled out these chrysanthemums. I don't end up using those. And then I also pulled out these sweetheart blossoms. I love these. I thought these were the perfect match for this. So again, just going around adding my cluster of flowers. This is the fun part to me. I don't mind making the album part too. I find that very fun, but I love decorating the front of an album, in this case a notebook. Again, another element from the collection that I doubled up with some black cardstock behind it, make it a little bit sturdier, thicker. And I'm using some Beacon Fabri-Tac, which is strong adhesive, but it doesn't adhere right away. So I really should have pulled out my hot glue gun. I like using my hot glue gun because it adheres right away, but I didn't want to wait. I was wanting to finish the album before going out to dinner that night, so I didn't want to wait for my hot glue gun to heat up. So I used the E6000, which it is a strong adhesive, but I usually prefer for it to just adhere immediately. This little bee, he's been doubled on some black cardstock. Super cute. And I had cut several of them out because I wasn't sure where I wanted to use them or how I wanted to use them. And I do end up using a couple of them. Again, adding a pop dot and a little bit of wet glue so he sits flush. Now I'm going through and adding some pearls. Again, I thought the pearls went really well with this collection. Just kind of scattering them using my jewel picker. And I love bows, and I thought a black bow on this would look great, so I'm adding that to the pockets. Using a little bit of E6000, I added that pearl. Again, that doesn't dry right away, so I used my tweezers to kind of hold it on there to give it a chance to dry. Now I'm adding my little honeycomb. That has a couple of layers behind it, and this cute little bee. And I also had this sweet like honey element, so I added that to one of the journaling cards just to make it more fun. And then I had to finish this off with some more heart blossoms from Wild Orchid Crafts, again using my Fabri-Tac and a couple pearls. This so sweet little sentiment from the collection, I backed on some black cardstock. I adhered it down first and it kind of blended in a little too much, so I just pulled it back up, cut out some black cardstock and added that to it. And then I'm going to finish this off with some pearls. So I hope this video wasn't too long for you. I hope you've enjoyed the process. And if you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I do have some photos following this and some more videos coming up. I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel and liking and leaving a comment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.